I'm just trying to find a condo in Coral Gables. Oh, it's so funny. We're next to a condo and we're about to start talking about condos because today's video is literally for anybody who's thinking about purchasing a condo. These are 10 things that you need to know about before you write that check at closing, that big check. You wanna make sure you're not getting into a mistake. You need to ask certain questions and know certain things before all is done. And this is your go-to video. So without further ado, here are 10 questions or 10 things you need to know about. Let's go. Welcome everybody, welcome. Today is, like you saw in the intro, an informative video for you to learn a little something. Now, whether you're using me as your real estate agent, I mean, if I'm your real estate agent, I guess I could essentially ask these questions for you. We have a list of questions that we just end up asking anyways. But if you're not working with me or from out of state or whatever the case is, and you're just interested in knowing what should I ask if I'm purchasing a condo, what are some good things for me to know? Well, these are the list of questions. Now there's just 10 questions. Obviously there's a few more questions you could probably ask, but these are like the 10 main questions that I would ask on behalf of my clients. Now, the first one is a pretty easy one and maybe one that you ask right where you're there in the showing is what's included in your association fee? Is it water? Is basic cable included? Insurance for the building included? Is the management included? What is included with that association fee? Typically here in the high rises in downtown Miami, water is typically included. I've seen basic cable included. I've seen internet become a more relevant thing happening nowadays with the condos. So just ask the association or the listing agent or whoever you're dealing with there, what is included with the association fee? And then that leads to the second question, which is, what are the rental restrictions of this association? Now, maybe you're not interested in purchasing for renting it out, but maybe you have intentions of renting out in the future, or maybe you plan on selling at some point in the future. You want to know what the rental restrictions are because at the end of the day, that's important for resale and it's important for you to know. Now, if you're thinking of renting and you're purchasing a condo, then I would say ask if you could rent it within the first year of owning. And if you can rent within the first year of owning, what are the rental restrictions? What are the minimum rental restrictions within the building? Can you rent it for 1 month? Could you rent it for 3 months? Could you rent it as many times as you want throughout the year? Could you only rent it 2 times? Or is it a minimum of 1 year? Find these things out ahead of time. That way you are aware. The third question to ask is if there are any pet restrictions. Maybe you don't have pets, so maybe this doesn't apply to you, but maybe you plan on renting it out again in the future or something of that sort, right? So it's always good to know, are there any pet restrictions? And sometimes if you are planning on renting out the unit, no pet restrictions for owners, but there may be pet restrictions for tenants in place. Sometimes that is the case, so just be sure to ask that question just so you know. It's always good to know these things ahead of time. Number 4, if you are purchasing a unit and you're on a time crunch, right? You need to close on this ASAP because you have nowhere to live. You're gonna be homeless if you don't move in 2 weeks. You need to find out how long it's going to take to get approved by the association. Or if you need it to be done fast, if there's any way that you could expedite this process. Typically here in Miami, I've seen applications typically take about 1 to 2 weeks to get an approval from the association. So keep that in mind. The 5th question to ask is if they could provide you with the condo docs of the association. Now, that term condo docs is referring to several different documents, which are the articles of incorporation, the declaration of the association, the bylaws, and more importantly, the rules and regulations of the association. Now, the rules and regulations of the association might even answer the questions that we just asked before, right? It might reference about the pets, about the rentals, about all of that. But I always say to ask those questions just in case, because you don't want any, maybe it says something different on the rules and regulations and then someone's telling you something different. So just kind of like cross-reference and ask just in case. The 6th question to ask for is for them to provide you with the most recent year-end financials of the association, along with the budget for the current year. Now, this is going to give you a great idea of where the dues for everybody is going, right? That's super important. You want to make sure that the association has strong reserves. That's important for obtaining financing. You see, if an association doesn't have any reserves, you might not be able to obtain financing for that condo, especially if you're putting a small down payment. If you're putting a large down payment, you may be able to get away with it because they're not doing an in-depth review. By large down payment, I mean maybe around like 25% and up, but that's something for you to talk to your lender about because there are laws always changing about that, right? But it's important to look at the reserves, and typically lenders want to see a 10% reserve because if there are any issues that do come up with the association, with the building, what if there's something in the roof that needs to be replaced, or they need to do the whole roof, or they need to paint the whole building, or do something big like that that costs a lot, then they would need to get that money from the reserves. And if there's no money in the reserves, then they need to go and ask the unit owners to pay, which is a special assessment. So if there's no money in reserves, then they ask for a special assessment for the improvements that need to be made. Now, sometimes there's money in reserves, but the cost of that labor or that job are so high that they have to ask for a special assessment on top of that. Now that's obviously, that would be normal, but a special assessment is something you want to be aware of when you are purchasing. And you not only want to know if there's ongoing, but you want to know if there are talks, because sometimes there's been talks within the association or within the board members of things that need to be done at some point in the future, and they may be talking about a future special assessment. And you, as a purchaser, have the right to know these things. So that's a very important question, because that means less money in your pocket at some point in the future, right? You want to know that. Now, the seventh question to ask would be to ask for the board meeting minutes. Sometimes if they're able to provide you with that, the board meeting minutes basically go over the meetings that they have with the board and the association, and the points that they're talking about within those meetings, right? So if you are able to get your hands on the board meeting minutes, you're able to understand the ongoing issues that the association is speaking of. Now, there's always things that go on with an association. Maybe they need to repaint, maybe they need to pressure clean, maybe they need to do some more landscaping. Those little things, maybe you want to know about them, and if you request those board meeting minutes, it may be able to give you a little more insight on that if you're able to obtain that. Now, the eighth question would be to ask if there's any pending litigation against the association. Sometimes people slip and fall. Sometimes there's litigation against the developer, which is very common here in Miami for things that come up after the developer has completed the project. Like, for example, I know of a building where they had to redo the rooftop deck of where the pool was because they didn't properly install the flooring. The developer, meaning the developer didn't properly install the flooring. So the building, the association has litigation against the developer to get that done properly and to pay for that, right? So that's something you see every now and again, especially with new developments. It's a pretty common thing. You just want to make sure it's nothing massive, right? And for a slip and fall case, things like that, you obviously just want to be aware of it. If there's any litigation that could be against association that results in big lump sum payments, that could be money out of your pocket. So just ask a simple question. That's it. The ninth question, this one is mainly for a building that's 40 years or older. You want to just ask if they've already obtained a 40-year recertification from the city, at least here down in Miami. That's a pretty big thing. It's important. During that 40-year recertification, when they have people go out to the building, the architects, the engineers that are, really inspecting the building and everything, they're looking at the structural integrity. They're looking at things that are very important to make sure that the building is strong and that it's safe to live there, right? So if they're coming in there, usually you see some buildings that are older, they start to get those special assessments around that 40-year mark because they're requesting that a lot of things be done around that 40-year mark, like maybe, changing rebar on the balconies, or changing the balconies, or in the garages, sometimes they need to do some repairs, some structural repairs, which is completely normal. You just have to make sure that that has been done. And if not, what's the status of that 40-year recertification? Have inspections been done already? What's going on? And the 10th point is a point that maybe it's something out of curiosity, you want to see how it's been increased over the years, maybe ask what prior association fees look like. Have they gone up drastically within the last few years? That might be something good for you to know and maybe understand why the association fee has been going up. That's just like a bonus question in reality. The prior 9 are the more important ones. The 9 ones, those 9 questions, I would say are very important. Ask them, get those answers in writing if you like, get them in an email, ask the association directly. Those are also documentation that you should be provided, and legally you have the right to get those, especially the condo docs and the financials and all of that. As per in Florida, here, if you're buying a condo, you have, there's like a little box you check on the contract that basically gives you 3 days from the day that you received the condo docs to review and cancel the deal if you're not in agreement. So let's say you get under contract and then 2 weeks later they send you the condo docs. From that day, 2 weeks later, you have 3 days to review. And if you didn't like what you saw in those condo docs and you were in agreement, you could cancel the deal, technically, right? That has to be a box that's checked on the contract though. So that's why you gotta make sure you have the right team on your corner when you're buying or selling a home. And that's where I'm plugging my services right here. If you're interested in buying or selling a home here in Florida or really anywhere, you can shoot me an email, YouTube at jonathanmvega.com. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions whatsoever, put them down in the comments, shoot me a DM on Instagram or whatever you like, but make sure you go like the video and subscribe. See you in the next video. Peace and love and happy Thanksgiving. Gobble, gobble, gobble.